New Orleans Saints, where were they on the composite? We pull this out here. I should have laminated this. It would have been better.
Really
Number
should.
15 on the composite, but an A+ per PFF. The New Orleans Saints, 2 first-round caliber players with their first 2 picks. I think that's why we did really like this. And this is where they just get the grades are lower because they didn't have 3rd and 4th round picks. Like if you just grade them off what they drafted, these first 3 picks, could they get any better?
You really think that's how people are great when they give them like C's? You think that's what's happening? They're like,
Yes.
no 3rd and 4th. I can't give this more than a
No,
C.
it happens subconsciously. I'll tell you in a second. Talise Fuanga, the first rounder out of the tackle out of Oregon State. Kool-Aid McKinstry, the 2nd round cornerback out of Alabama. Didn't have another pick until the 5th round. They get QB Spencer Rattler out of South Carolina. They got your guy Bub Means, the wide receiver out of Pittsburgh. Jalen Ford, the linebacker out of Texas. Christian Boyd, defensive tackle or edge/D tackle out of Northern Iowa. So I thought it was a pretty good draft by the Saints. What happens is people just look at the talent brought in.
But they're good talent. Like
No, I know that. But
people thought Rattler would go in the 3rd round. So to get him in the 5th, like they wouldn't even notice the difference. It's just, they got Rattler. 3rd round, perfect.
I think more people should have the Saints in the top 5 or 6 then, based off of
Agreed.
the evaluation of those players, where they got them. I mean, we thought Rattler could go as high as 2 because 2nd round, because you don't know how teams are going to evaluate quarterbacks and when they want to get them. And
Did you see the analysis surrounding the reason for his fall that people posited?
Yeah, I mean, I saw people push back against it, but yeah, go ahead.
What was the pushback again? So the suggestion was that how Rattler came across on this Netflix reality show that he was a part of in high school was bad, and therefore teams were like, "Oh, I can't have that. Can't have that kind of attitude. Get out of here."
Yeah, and then some of that may have carried over to Oklahoma, but then every report coming out of South Carolina and the way he's acted and handled things the last few years was positive. That was the pushback was like this. That was 4 years ago, whatever it was, right?
But that doesn't necessarily mean that's not. I mean, NFL teams don't always act rationally just because it's entirely plausible that seeing that put off NFL teams, even if he has subsequently matured and become a different player, different person.
I'm torn on those two things, right? I'm empathetic to the player. Imagine if someone judged you off something you did or said or acted when you were 17, whether the camera was on or not. That would be horrible. And you would say the difference in me at 17 versus 20 versus 22, 23 was astronomically different. Right. On the other hand, I mean, I was around when I was coaching at Elite 11. I was around Josh Rosen, right? And he was kind of immature at that age, right? Because of his circumstances, right? Because of how he was. Whatever circumstances he was put in, maybe he didn't come across great toward the coaches. And that may have, not changed throughout his career. I don't know.
Right.
At the same time, there were some coaches who couldn't stand, I can be honest about this 8 years later.
Probably.
There were some coaches who couldn't stand Christian Kirk.
Yeah.
As one of the receivers there it was called The Opening at the time. And he's turned out to be pretty good. They're like, oh, no, this guy's never going to make it. Like, okay, you were wrong. So those are tough, right? So the empathy I have for the player is, okay, you're so much different at 18 years old versus 22, 23. The empathy I have for the teams are you're only allotted 7 picks. And on the high end, you're going to pick 11 or 12 times. You might pick less than that. I'm all for eliminators. So even if it's unfair to the player, I always use the phrase, I would rather let someone else take that chance. So if a team's like, that's a little too risky for us, I'm empathetic to the team that just says, we only get so many of these picks. I don't want to use one if I have any sort of question or doubt. So I kind of get it from both sides.
It's also,
as usual,
it's a data point.
Lukewarm take on that.
Yeah, I mean, it's a data point that's difficult to counter. So it's a unique, like absent sort of theoretical behind-the-scenes cameras in his locker room at South Carolina, it's hard to know if the positive stuff is actually true. You know what I mean? Like you're hearing it secondhand, you're not seeing it, whereas seeing it resonates and makes an impact. There's no way of countering that 3 years later, even if it's true, to the same degree. So if you're an NFL team, all you can do is be like, well, let's talk to him. Let's do the stuff that we do to research a guy's character. Let's talk to coaches. Let's talk to teammates. That's still different to seeing it on camera actually happen before.
I also, call me skeptical here, there's a report from a reporter that the NFL, right? So when you say the NFL, you're talking
NFL.
32 teams.
Right.
Minus the 6 that just drafted quarterbacks. So you're telling me 20 to 25 teams all came to the same conclusion that the video from high school is the reason we're out on Rattler.
Yep.
Or Johnny, inside reporter guy, spoke to like 1 or 2 teams who happened to mention the video, and maybe that was their reason, which I think for 1 or 2 teams, like if that's the reason, that's fine. And then projected it out and said NFL teams. When the other reality could have been the only team that we thought was really going to be in the need for a quarterback in this draft who didn't take one was the Raiders. They were the only team left, and we just thought, okay, they'll wait, and maybe they just didn't like Rattler, or maybe they were the one team that cared about the video.
So let's start.
No one else needed to get him.
Let's start with Rattler since we're on there. 5th round steal.
Love it in the 5th round, absolutely.
And not just that, but it's a classic guy of. So it feels like a steal because people thought he would probably go in the 3rd round as that QB7 and the sort of next tier down of quarterbacks once you cleared all the top guys. But the one it's in the next wave of QBs that everybody identified at least has starter tools, right? May never get there, probably won't because quarterbacks drafted that low don't. But he at least has the tools to be a starting NFL quarterback. He's got the arm. He's got the best mechanics of any of these guys. You listen to quarterback coaches, they talk about just the fluidity of his stroke and just how amazing it looks and, picture perfect every time. He's at least got the ability to do that. And going in the 5th round means there's no like expectations of it. But for a guy with no expectations, but actually the tools to do it, he goes to back up Derek Carr, who's a quarterback in that permanently on the hot seat category, So there are few places he could have landed that have a clearer pathway to being a starter if you can show you have that ability in the next year or two, right? So from Spencer Rattler's point of view, I think it's a great landing spot as well.
Did they call the Carr family? Not so much Derek, but more so Darren. Has Darren been alerted that the Saints also drafted another quarterback?
6 p.m. day 3. Heads up, Darren. We might take a guy.
Got to give you a heads up. He's blocked Rattler and he's blocked the Saints on. I'm blocked by Darren Carr, so that's why.
I don't think I am yet somehow. All right, round 1.
Show a couple Derek Carr turnover-worthy plays. See what happens.
I think I've deliberately stayed away from antagonizing him directly to avoid getting blocked. Talise Fuaga.
Okay, talk about the players. Talk about the players, Sam.
Talk about the players. This one makes sense, right? Middle of the 1st round, they had a pretty bad need at right tackle if Ryan Ramczyk is on the way out, which it sounds like he might be. Even if he isn't, they have a need at tackle. So it makes sense.
Yeah, I like Fuaga. I think he was one of the top tackles in the draft. They get him at that point. He can, much like Latham, crush people in the run game, and I think he's a solid pass protector. I like Fuaga quite a bit. And I think Kool-Aid McKinstry, I know you didn't love him as a 1st rounder, but we talk about in the 2nd round, getting him here. I don't think he does anything exceptionally well. He's just a good, solid, cogent player.
McKinstry, yeah. So there's a few players like this in this draft where everyone else thinks they're steals. I just think they were good value. Like I think this is where McKinstry should have gone towards the top of the 2nd round based off his tape, and it's where he went, right? So it's not like I like the pick. I think it's the right pick. It's a good pick at an area that makes sense, and it's good value for where he is. I just don't think it's like, they got him. It's a 20-point steal based off his average draft position. I think this is where he belonged, but I think it still makes it a good pick. So Fuaga in the 1st round, McKinstry in the 2nd, Spencer Rattler then as their next pick, Bub Means in the 5th round. I like Bub Means and Christian Boyd in particular. 5th round and 6th round, on top of what they've already drafted, I think are great picks. Bub Means, I think, is like 6'1", 212 pounds, right? Physical prototype. I think his contested catch rate is like 50%. He's pretty good at that. In a vacuum, he attacks the ball well, like hands catches it, hands out in front, plucks it out of the air. He had a ridiculously one-dimensional role in college. So average depth of target, 17 plus yards downfield. I think he can be a lot better player with some more variety in what they're asking him to do. And unlike Brian Thomas Jr., who was doing a lot of that, but had an elite quarterback throwing him the ball, Bub Means did not. His quarterback stank last year, and therefore his chances of doing a lot were limited. Another guy with elite PFF gas. So pretty good athleticism
Means
anyway.
was on the freaks list too, I believe.
Right, but like elite PFF gas. I think he's got good releases. Route running could do with some nuance, but like I earmarked him as a really nice sleeper early in this draft process. And then Christian Boyd.
I misspoke earlier, by the way. Boyd, just a defensive tackle. I was confusing him with someone else. Apologies.
Misinformation.
Defensive tackle.
Yeah, defensive tackle, but a good one. Northern Iowa, so obviously the level of competition was a little bit iffy. He was one of a number of players this year. So where I struggled a bit this season or this draft process was you heard a lot about the guys that have gone back to school. It's going to be a bad class, but also because of COVID and all these things, there's a ton of these guys that have been in college forever, and you're coming out and they're sort of a day 3 prospect, and immediately in your brain you're like, day 3 prospect, he's 24, he's been in college since the Clinton administration, he's probably not good, you know? But actually this is just the reality of the world. Like you're going to get more of these guys, right? And we need to kind of adjust what the normal benchmarks are for that kind of thing. So he'd been in college for 6 years and had played in 5 of them, right? Redshirted 1 year, already 24. But like he's pretty good. He's strong. He's at his best when he sort of torques and just ragdolls guys and gets rid of the block. But I think he could be a good NFL player once he's coached up a little bit. I think that level of competition was rough, but I think he's got some ability in the 6th round?
Yeah, 38 bench reps for Boyd.
Strong.
The question is the 12th percentile broad, 13th percentile 20-yard shuttle, 10th percentile 3-cone. So movement skills not as good as just his pure strength at this point at 6'3", 325. As I mentioned earlier, there's not a whole bunch of those body types in this draft, so not bad getting him in the 6th.
Yeah.